Welcome to another episode of the Better Than I Found It podcast. You're listening to Baylor men's golf coach, Mike McGraw. Today's guest is Cricket Musch, who happens to be one of the finest men you'd ever want to meet in the golf business. He's currently serving as a talent consultant for Nike, but at one time, he was a very successful college golf coach. Cricket, who coached at Texas El Paso for about 10 years, gives great insights into coaching and describes his team's runner-up finish in the 1988 NCAA championship, despite missing their best player. He also talks about what attributes make a great player. If anyone should know this, it would be Cricket. His stories during this interview are gold. I hope you enjoy. Okay, I want everybody to welcome my very dear friend, Cricket Musch, to the podcast today. Cricket, great to have you on Better Than I Found It.
Mike, it's a pleasure to be on. I was flattered by the invitation.
Well, you know, you're one of those faces in college golf that was around every day for a long, long time. And then now we don't get to see you as much. So sort of like with Jim Ahern about a year ago, I brought Jim out of retirement to do a podcast. You're not in retirement by any stretch, but you are somebody that people would recognize in the college golf world. And I just thought we'd kind of get together and talk a little bit about it and give your story to a lot of people that don't know it.
Well, I've had the privilege to get to do this my whole life. It's never been one of those jobs that I've got to do it. And that's been the best part about it.
Well, that's a wonderful way to look at it. Gratitude is a wonderful thing, I think, and I know you're thankful for the opportunities that you had. But so I have a lot I want to get to today, but before we reminisce too much, tell me what you're up to right now. I know you're not completely retired, but just give me your position you have right now.
Well, I'm a consultant for Nike in the golf category. Out evaluating talent, continuing to build relationships with college golf coaches, parents, industry folks, agents, and doing what I really loved to do when I was at Nike, and that's evaluating talent and determining who Nike should sign.
And that's a big job for any company because if you miss on that fairly often, that's not a good thing, right?
It is not, and sometimes it's costly. So you have to be pretty good at it. And the kids today, it's amazing what we've seen from the likes of Victor Hovland and Colin Morikawa and Matt Wolff and Xander Schauffele, how quickly they translate to the next level. So it has gotten even more difficult to do that.
Yeah, well, and being a consultant now, you're using all those years of experience and all that wisdom, collected wisdom, if you will, to maybe help a younger generation of people that are looking for talent. But anyway, so that's kind of where you are now, which is great. And we're going to get back into a little bit of that a little later in the podcast. But right now, I just kind of want to get, and some of this will be informational for me because I don't think I've ever asked you some of this, even all those years we knew each other and saw each other and shared dinner and whatever we did. But where did you grow up, and like who got you started in the game? Who was the biggest influence on your golf as a young person? Give me that sort of junior golf capsule, if you will.
Well, I grew up in a small town in southern New Mexico called Alamogordo, a town of about 15,000 people. Golf was a big deal there. 9-hole golf course. It was kind of the center of activity for families in Alamogordo, and there was a junior high PE teacher who was the high school golf coach. His name was Bill Aldridge. He graduated from, believe it or not, Oklahoma State.
Oh, wow.
He received a degree in physical education. He played football for Oklahoma State. And he has the distinction of being Mr. Irrelevant. He was the last guy chosen in the NFL draft when he graduated from Oklahoma State. He did not play. He kind of taught himself golf after he left school. He started teaching, but he ended up in Alamogordo. And if I could best describe him from who he was a Gary Player type guy. Worked tremendously hard at it. Was into physical fitness all the time, and he created a culture that I believe won 6 or 7 state high school championships over the course that he was there, time that he was there. But to get to the meat of it, he would look at some of us younger kids. I started playing when I was 5. My mom and dad took me out. But as we got into the summer programs at Alamogordo Country Club, he would look at the kids that he thought had a chance, and he gave you, when you got into 7th grade, your own bag shag full of golf balls with your name on it, and that was yours all the way through high school if you chose to play on the golf team. And he built a range just for us. It had nothing to do with the club itself. And we could go up there and hit balls. He maintained the range. We would hit balls, go out and pick them up. And that was kind of how we got into it. And that was kind of the start of it. We won 2 state high school championships my junior and senior year at Alamogordo High School. We had a very, very good team. And one of the guys on our team was Brad Bryant. Brad played on the PGA Tour for 20 plus years. He won once, I think. And his little brother, who did not play on our team, Bart Bryant, had a more successful career than Brad. Brad played better as he got onto the PGA Tour champions. He won the U.S. Senior Open, I believe. But we had a really, really good team, and that was kind of the start of it.
Well, but I mean, that shows you what sort of somebody putting blood, sweat, and tears and tender loving care behind something like Bill Aldridge did. I mean, because Alamogordo becoming state champion, I mean, that's kind of unheard of. And how long did he stay? Did he stay many, many years after you graduated from high school?
It's actually a really sad story, is that he was at the state championships in Albuquerque. They used to play at the UNM South Championship golf course every year. And I was a senior in college at the time, and he was with the team, and he was at dinner with the team. The team had left the restaurant directly across the street from the hotel they were staying in. The team left while he was paying the bill, and he was also talking to one of his cronies. And he was counting his change as he stepped off the curb, and someone changed lanes and wasn't looking and hit him, and he unfortunately was killed. Right in the middle of the state championships. I believe Bart Bryant was on that team, and it was really, really sad because he was a great mentor, really competitive, a very, very good player. But he gave a lot of hope to so many of us and taught us how to work at it. It truly came out of the dirt with him.
What do you think was the best lesson you learned from Bill? I mean, your high school coach. I mean, is there anything that stands out?
I believe that his organization, and he was one of those guys that, like, when we would get into the spring, once it was started to warm up a little bit, we had practice every morning at 6:30 at a park in Alamogordo, where we'd get up at 6:30, take our bag shakes down there, and we would hit 7 and 8 irons. And if you did not show up, he knew which bedroom window was yours at your house, and he would knock on it. And then you would end up going down to practice. You couldn't hit golf balls. You had to run around the park the entire time. And if you stopped, then he made you do push-ups. So you didn't miss but once. But I think more than anything was the discipline and the hard work it took to be a champion.
Yeah, that is something that my dad taught me. And you mentioned Gary Player a little while ago. I mean, Gary Player would never have won 8 majors if it hadn't been for discipline and hard work and physical fitness. So obviously Bill was cut out of that same mold, I guess.
He was, for sure.
Well, listen, so you win 2 state championships. Obviously some coaches get interested, and you played golf at New Mexico State in college, and you were an All-American. But how How did that recruitment look? Because I know it looked different than it does today. How did it look in the 70s?
For sure. It was really organic, and frankly, it fell on the shoulders of the kids and the families themselves to write letters to various coaches. I did have a couple of scholarship opportunities. I had one to Arizona State. I played in the Southwest Amateur right after high school, and Bill Mann used to do the scoreboard for the Southwestern Golf Association. He was also the golf coach at Arizona State. And I'd written him a couple of letters, and I happened to play well and introduced myself to him, and he did offer a scholarship there. But I think all 5 guys on our team were given the opportunity to play golf at some level, whether it was junior college or Division I. So that was kind of the process. And by elimination, Las Cruces was 64 miles away from Alamogordo, and it was close, and they had a good team. So that's where I chose to go.
You know, you say that a town of 15,000 and the 5 kids who comprised a state championship team all played college golf at some level. I mean, that's like unheard of in a town that size.
Yeah, and it all goes back to Coach Aldridge. And there was another gentleman who was hired as a head golf professional at Alamogordo Country Club. His name was Ralph Sutton. And he was very skilled in basic mechanics of the golf swing. And the one thing that I gleaned from him was the grip. And it is your only connection to the golf club. And if you have a good grip, your chances go up on being able to hit the ball in the center of the club face. And I always use that. When I would go out and recruit in college, I would look at guys' grips because it takes some work to change it. And so why not eliminate that piece from the very get-go?
Yeah, my dad was a big believer in the grip being great. He tried to teach me Ben Hogan's grip. I wish he'd have taught me a little bit more about Ben Hogan's golf swing. I'd have been a little better. You know, so you went to college at New Mexico State and played a whole career there, and you played for a really, really sweet guy, a great, great golf coach named Herb Wimberly. You were an All-American your senior year, I guess, or one of the years. Junior year. You won twice in college, so you had a very successful college career. But Herb was truly a legend in college coaching, and I actually exchanged letters with him, you know, several years later. But I didn't end up going to New Mexico State. But so, tell me about Herb's style as a coach. I mean, what was the best thing he taught you? Did his influence actually influence you to be a coach, or maybe influence your coaching style? Just tell me about Herb and how all that came about.
You know, Herb was one of those guys that back in that day and time, the money you would make as a college golf coach was not a lot. So he had several jobs. He was the director of golf and the head professional at New Mexico State University's golf course. So Herb was busy constantly. But he was one of those guys that would, if you asked him for help, he would go out and spend a little time with you, but he would give you some things to think about so that you could fix it yourself. I remember having a hard time making contact for whatever reason, and he said, take that basket of golf balls and go get in that bunker and start hitting balls out of the bunker with a 6-iron. And so I was having a hard time. This is pretty funny. Having a hard time getting it out over the lip with this 6-iron. So I went back in. I said, Coach, I'm having a struggle getting it out of the bunker with a 6-iron. He says, well, take a 7-iron then. And I just started laughing, you know. But what it did was that it was a lesson in how to stay really still and rotate and hit the golf ball solid out of a fairway bunker. So I started hitting it off the grass, and it was pretty simple.
You know, he was old school, obviously.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you wouldn't get a lot of lessons like that, probably, but you should get some like that. I mean, there's wisdom in giving just a little bit, and plus, he actually had you learn it yourself, something you could take into competition yourself.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, so was that the best thing he taught you, or did he teach you some other things, or was there anything else you can remember?
I think he was not one of those guys that was really got into your golf swing. It was more about course management type stuff. Coaches back then are so different than I was or you are today, Mike. It was different. I think they let you go out and figure it out yourself. And there was, he did make you work for it. We qualified a lot, and you had to earn your spot. I will tell you that he also was one of those guys that could feel who the best players were. And here's an example: is that my sophomore year, I had played well at the Tucker, which is the University of New Mexico's annual tournament. It's one of the oldest college tournaments in the country. And I'd played well there in high school events. My freshman year, I finished 5th in the Tucker, a shot behind Ben Crenshaw, who finished 4th. It was one of those golf courses that I really loved. And so we fast forward into the fall of 1973 and, the fall of 74. And the Tucker's coming up, and we had a tournament in Oklahoma City 2 weeks before, and I made the trip and played terrible. And so Coach made a decision after some qualifying that he was going to exempt 2 players, one of them being me, and I had missed in the qualifying. And he decided to exempt me. And when he told the rest of the team, he had one guy who had not qualified either, but was a senior, and he was one of the better players, went into his office and questioned him. And he got so mad that he quit. And he walked out of Herb's office. It was the last time he ever played. And the guy was a really, really good player. His name was Bill Sumner. And so I run into Sumner between classes on the Monday after the Tucker. And he storms up to me. This guy was not someone you wanted to get in a scrum with. He'd kill you. He ran up to me. He said, "How'd you play?" And I said, "Well, I won." And he did not know what to say. And he just walked off. And it was one of those things when I coached that when you have a feel for someone in a certain situation that you know that those guys are going to play well at that place and it fits them, that I would use that from time to time.
Well, that's actually that's a great coaching tool right there, and a great thing to learn as a coach, because everybody feels like, I hear so many coaches say, "Well, yeah, but I've got to make it fair for everybody. It's got to be." But the truth is, your job as a coach is to try to get the best players on the golf course or in the van going to the tournament that you possibly can. And sometimes it doesn't feel very good for some kids.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And the one thing that I learned too is that our team, my team, your team, they know who the 5 best players are when the heat's really on. And even though they have friendships with guys on the team, they know who the best 5 players are. And I think it's your responsibility to deliver that to them.
Well, and I also think your very, very best players who want to win, they want to win a team title. Sometimes they get a little frustrated with a coach who's just trying to make everybody feel good. And they'd rather have that best player in the lineup if they can get him there. And if your job as a coach is to do that, and you're supposed to have some expertise, you got to trust that occasionally.
Yeah.
So when did you actually become a college coach? I mean, because you played college golf, and then was it a few years later, or what was your first job as a coach?
Well, when I graduated from New Mexico State, unfortunately, I was one of those guys that I had to take online Spanish 1 and 2 to graduate. And for whatever reason, I kept procrastinating. And when I ended up after 4 years, I still had to complete Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 to graduate.
No bueno.
Yeah, no point. And you can't take them both in the same semester. So I had to find a job to pay for school. And I went to work for a new chain restaurant that moved into Las Cruces called Ken's Pizza. And you're very familiar with Ken's Pizza.
Very much so. They had a bunch of them in Oklahoma.
Right. Convenient locations all over the place. Anyway, I signed up to be the day man who came in and prepared all the food for the day for Ken's Pizza in order to make enough money to live and pay for school. And the next thing I know, I went from that to had a percentage of the deal, and we had 3 stores, and we were in the process of building a 4th. And I was the guy that was going to all these stores across New Mexico, running them. And it just happened so quickly. And all of a sudden, we're 3.5 years into this, and I'm like, what in the heck am I doing? And I was reading the El Paso Times sports page on a Monday morning, and on the left-hand column, there was a little column that said UTEP to start golf program. And it hit me right in the stomach. I said, that's what I want to do. And I knew a lot of the people. I did some investigation that were on the selection committee, the Bill Eschenbrenners and the Danny Swains, and a lot of golf folks from El Paso that I'd known growing up. And so I threw my name in the hat, and I want to say there were 240 some people that applied for this job, and they hired the pizza guy.
Wow. I mean, that is the most unusual journey to college, to a Division I college coaching position I've ever heard, right there. Straight from pizza to there.
Yeah, I guess they figured I knew where to take them to eat after we played.
Or you can at least get a good break on the price.
Right.
So you become the coach. What year was that, by the way?
That was in October of 1981. And one of the things that precipitated this was Title IX, that every school had to get their numbers correct. And so UTEP needed to add another sport. And El Paso, frankly, is and has been a great golf town. Lee Trevino lived there when he started his career on the PGA Tour. When he won all those majors, he was living in El Paso. He actually put $100,000 into an endowment before UTEP even had a golf program for a scholarship, so that once they did, that they would have that money there. But it was one of those places where it really made sense because of weather, the golf courses, and everything else. And so in 81, they hired me, and we played the spring of 1982 with all walk-ons. And that was something.
I bet that was. Well, so, okay, we're going to eventually get to the 1988 NCAA championship, where your team finished runner-up. But tell me how you built that team. So you get hired in 81. Your first spring is 82. 6 years later, you almost win a national championship. There was a building process. So how did that happen? And just take me through that process a little bit.
Well, obviously you're not going to go out and sign the very best players in junior golf, even though I went out to the Rolex event in November during Thanksgiving break. This is my first recruiting trip to go watch guys. I knew Mike Holder from when I played, because my last couple of years he had just started to coach, and I could see his success. And this is a funny story. So I show up, and I knew Mike, and I thought, well, you know what? I'll just kind of follow him and see what he does and kind of learn how to do this thing. And we're out there the very first morning, and I think he's probably watching Brian Watts and Michael Bradley and who knows who, right? And he looks at me as we're standing next to the green, and he says, "What are you doing? What are you watching these boys for?" And I said, "Well, Coach, they're pretty good." He says, let me give you some advice. You're not going to get these boys right now. Maybe you should go watch somebody you can get." I didn't know what to say.
Well, I will give Mike this always. He said it because he meant it. And by gosh, it was direct and he confronted you right then and there. And he just did it.
Well, as you know, he's a very good friend, and he helped me tremendously through coaching. But that was the first time. But so I ended up seeing some guys that were periphery Division I players playing at that event, and started recruiting them. But what I did realize was I wasn't even going to get those kind of guys. So I started down the junior college route to begin with, and I recruited some guys out of that West Texas, that whole crew that played junior college golf, and they've had some very good players. And so we loaded up with a few of those guys. I did have a guy from El Paso named Steve Valdez who was incredibly talented. Our first year, he played well enough actually to qualify as an individual for the NCAA championship at Fresno at San Joaquin Country Club. But I started that way, and then I signed a couple of kids from Canada. Rick Todd, who was a very good college player, All-American 3 times. He won a handful of college events. He's currently coaching, I believe, at the University of California, Riverside. And John Bell, who was another very good player. Herb Wimberly, 35 miles up the road, used to recruit a lot of Canadian guys. And Todd fell in my lap, basically, because one of the kids playing for Herb told me that Rick was going to go to Ohio State. He was recruited by Jim Brown, but it didn't work out for some reason or another, and he was looking for a place to go. So that was a real find. And then I started to focus on kids from colder climates who could come play at a place where the sun shines 360 days a year, and where we were going to build it and sold it in. And we had a handful of really, really good players. One of them is J.P. Hayes, who was in the second recruiting class. J.P. was from Appleton, Wisconsin, a very, very accomplished junior golfer up there, and played very well. For those that don't know him, he played on the PGA Tour for a number of years and won twice. So it was that type of mentality to find kids just to give them a chance and sell a vision.
Well, I think that lesson you got from Mike Holder that day was find kids you can sign. Go watch kids you have a chance to sign, and then you can build a program from there. So you're starting to get some pretty good players, obviously kids who become All-American and would go on to play the tour. How did that 88 team come about? Because that didn't just happen overnight. That was a building process, I'm sure.
It was. I think the success that we were starting to have, when I interviewed for the job, I walked in and told them that I had a plan on how to raise money, how to involve the community. And I said, if we can if we can raise this kind of money and we get the support of the golf community and the courses in El Paso, I think we can win a conference championship in our third full year. And sure enough, these guys do it. We win the conference championship in the WAC, and the number one team in the country at the time was BYU. And these kids ended up somehow or another pulling it off, and we win at Wyoming in our third year. And I also told them, I said, if we can do that, I think we can win a national championship in 6. I'm selling like crazy. And as you said, we're within 3 shots. It literally on the last hole is where UCLA beat the 3 teams that tied for second. But it was a culmination of getting better. And I remember qualifying for the NCAA championship in '85 after we won the conference. That was the first time our team made it. And that experience was totally different for us because there's so much incredible pressure that comes with that. And another lesson that I learned from Coach Holder was he put pressure on his kids all year long. until those last couple of weeks of the year. And that's when he tried to take all the pressure off. And I learned from that eventually, because we qualified for the national championships in 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90. And we got better all along. But to get back to the question, that year in 88, we had two freshmen, Paul Stankowski and David Bishop, who were really talented and special human beings when it came to playing the game and living life. They were unbelievable. And all the guys on our team, we had a kid named Kevin Gay, who was from Newington, Connecticut, who was our best player. He was really talented, won a couple of college events. Chris Kaufman from Arlington, Texas, who was one of the Texas guys that we recruited out of high school, and one of the first that we could sign that was a true freshman. And then a kid named Jason Nishimoto from Hilo, Hawaii. And he was a kid that I happened to meet at the WAC championship over in Hawaii one year. And word started to spread that we were getting pretty good, and kids thought they had a chance. And so we continued to get better.
So Connecticut to Texas to Hawaii, your recruiting budget had to have increased during that time, I would think.
Well, it was still by mail and phone call mostly. Stankowski grew up in Oxnard, California, about 20 minutes from North Ranch Country Club. And then David Bishop was from Fort Lauderdale.
Did Paul come out and watch that golf tournament at North Ranch? You probably played in that event, didn't you?
We did, but we didn't play very well until he was on the team. Bishop actually was the best player we ever had at UTEP. And Lee Trevino told me about him. He said, there's this family that shows up at the Jackie Gleason Inverary Classic, which is now the Honda. He said, they have this little boy that is pretty good, and they watch me every hole. And every year they come out and the kid gets better, and they talk about him. He said, you ought to go watch him play. So I went to the Rolex tournament during the holidays and watched him play, and he was a carbon copy of the way Trevino swung at the golf ball. And 4-time All-American, 3-time second-team All-American, never made first team.
That's still a pretty good player right there, Cricket.
He's a pretty good player. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, so Lee Trevino gets us a $100,000 endowment and brings up an All-American. I'd say he had a pretty good impact on the UTEP golf program.
He did, and he is such a generous human being. He came back every year that I was a coach for a fundraiser. It was called the Lee Trevino UTEP Golf Pro-Am, and helped us raise money. And I'm incredibly grateful and thankful for the guy.
You know, when junior golfers in Dallas come and visit me and we talk, and, you know, I asked them, have you met Lee Trevino? And all of them say, no. Why? And I said, because you're crazy if you don't meet this guy. Sit down with Lee Trevino and just buy his lunch and listen to him talk. He can talk, by the way. And, but there's so much to be learned about how to maximize what God gave you. I mean, I've always said this for a long time. A lot of people, or many people, have been given a lot, but Lee Trevino's done a lot with what he's been given. And you just think about what that man has done in the game of golf with, I mean, no literally gifts and skills. He just created that out of what God gave him. It's unbelievable.
When I was a freshman at New Mexico State, he came down or went up to Las Cruces to play in a little afternoon fundraiser to raise money for the golf program with a guy named Ben Kern, who was also on the PGA Tour. He went to New Mexico State. And Coach let us go play 18 holes, and whoever shot the lowest score would caddy for Trevino, and the second lowest score would caddy for Ben. And I happened to shoot 67, and I was a low guy. So I caddied for Trevino. I'm 18 years old. And I can't even get a word out other than he asks how far it is, and I'll tell him, and he'll pick whatever club he thinks he needs to hit based on the situation. Right? And so for 15 holes, I don't hardly say a word. And we're walking down the par 5, and he turns to me and he said, how did you get to caddy for me? And I told him the story. He said, what are you doing on Monday? And I said, what do you mean? He said, what are you doing this coming Monday? And I said, well, I'm going to be home. School's out this afternoon for Christmas break. He says, can you be at El Paso Country Club at 9:00 on Monday morning? We have a big game every Monday there, and you're going to be my partner. And I said, I'll be there. So I show up, and there are 50 guys, and this is quite a collection of folks. And I couldn't even begin to tell you what all of them do, but you probably could guess. But Trevino loved to be around his cronies. He loved to gamble. He loved to have fun, and he loved to play golf. And he said, all right, here's the deal. You go make as many birdies as you can. I'm covering all the bets, and you and I are playing every other two-man team combination. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
So off we go, right? We finish. I'm in the first group. He's in the last, and he walks straight to the putting green. He says, how many birdies do you make? And I kind of hung my head and stuck up one finger. And he started laughing. He said, what hole? I said, 7. Then he really started laughing because now this day it's 48. The wind's blowing about 25, and it is not friendly to play golf. He shoots 64 and makes 1 bogey. Guess which hole? 7.
There you go.
We shoot 62, and when it's all over with, he walks out to the putting green and hands me some money. I'm not going to tell everybody what it was, but it was a lot. And he said, you're welcome to play here during the holidays with us anytime you want. And I went back every year for 4 years during the holidays and played with those guys.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. You know, it's funny. Most people don't. And that's part of what you just described with Lee Trevino, that whole entire story is why I tell these guys, I bet if you found a way to sit down and talk with that man, I bet he'd help you. I know he would, in fact. Now, I'm not speaking for Lee Trevino, but I am speaking to just kind of what he's been for the game of golf. I'd never heard that story, and thank you for telling me that. Well, you guys finished runner-up in the 1988 NCAA championship. You coached how many more years after that?
My last event was in March of 1990 when I decided to take the job as the executive director of the Sun Bowl football game and the Sun Carnival Association in El Paso. So, but for another 2.5 years, or year and a half, I guess, is what it was.
All right. I want, before we get into, the fact you were in the sort of business world, golf industry type deal before you got out of coaching, what was the greatest thing that happened to you as a coach, aside from finishing a runner-up in the NCAA championship, aside from winning the conference championship, the WAC, against maybe the best team in the country at the time? Like, what else, what could you say is like a shining moment for you?
Well, the 1988 NCAA championship, we had a very good team. And we show up and we're ready to go. We were loose. We went to Magic Mountain on Sunday night and rode roller coasters and had fun before the Monday practice round started, and we were ready to go. And the first hole, our number one player, Kevin Gay, hits a shot out of the rough, and he tears his rotator cuff in one of his shoulders, and he can't hardly hit it without this excruciating pain. Somehow or another, he finishes and shoots 78, but he's done. And David Bishop did not play very well, and there was an instance that was unfortunate with his dad watching him play. He ends up shooting 80 the first day with 6 or 7 3-putts, and it was not a good situation. And so after the round, I'm trying to deal with losing our best player. David Bishop and his father are having issues, and I'm trying to get these 4 guys to focus on what's coming, because we have a good enough team to finish the best we've ever finished, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all this stuff's going down. So I'm working with David on the putting green. He was moving his head, and once he finally started getting some confidence. He seemed to relax a little bit until I look up and his father's coming across the putting green at us. And at that point, I knew that this was not going to be a good situation. So I told David to keep doing what he's doing, and I tried to head him off. And when I got over to him, we had a little confrontation where there was some physicality involved, not for my part. And David witnessed this whole thing. And so I said, Mr. Bishop, that's uncalled for, and we're gonna leave. So we go to the hotel, and now I'm like sitting in my room going, what in the world are we gonna do?
You're going to be four-legged the whole week, correct? I mean,
four-legged.
Okay. Yeah.
Every time one of those kids draws it back, it counts.
Yeah.
And make a long story short, I go in and sit down with Bish and talk him through it and had him focus on the fact that he is an important cog in this team and that he needs to step up and be the guy. And he's more than capable of doing that. And obviously it was true, being a 4-time All-American, as we would fast forward. And he goes out and he shoots 74, 70, 70. He finishes 19th, which makes him an All-American because he's a top 20 guy. But we play with 4 guys. And back then there were 2 cuts at the NCAA. First cut after 36 to 20 teams, we make it on the number. The second cut is 15 with 1 round to go. We make it on the number. And we're 23 behind UCLA starting the last round. And these kids shoot 72, 71, 70, 69, which was 282. It was the lowest round of the entire tournament by a team by 5 shots.
Oh, my goodness.
And we did it with 4 guys. And I think the lesson here is that it taught them how to think their way around the golf course and make really good decisions under the most pressure. And that was probably getting that accomplished with these kids and getting them to believe that they could still do it was amazing to me.
Well, it shows you coaching does have something to do with this. A lot of people say, well, all you have to do is get them in the van and get them in the right uniform and on the tee on time. But there's a lot more to it than that. And a lot of people don't realize that you become an amateur psychologist or psychiatrist, if you will. And it's like you had to talk Kevin Bishop into understanding you can do this and your team needs you. Let's go. This is go time. Good job, Cricket. I like that.
Well, thanks. And to David Bishop's father's credit, he did apologize and he stayed there all 4 years. And to this day, grateful to be able to coach a guy like David Bishop.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing that stands out, Mike, is that you have to make hard decisions. And when we were building this program, I had a couple of guys that were junior college players that decided in their final semester at school that they were not going to go to class because they were going to work on their golf games. And when I found out about that, and they were 2 of our best players, that I had to let them go, even though it was going to affect our program and our team. And we were able to plug in some other guys. But the story is that there was a bit of a confrontation that one of them had with me when I told them they were suspended for 2 weeks and they walked in and quit. So if you fast forward about 2007, so this is probably 20 plus years, I'm playing in a tournament with one of my best buddies in Albuquerque, a 4-ball, the state 4-ball. And we go to the first tee, the last round, and I get a tap on the shoulder, and it's this guy who I threw off the team. And I go, "Hi, Rob." He goes, "Hey, coach, before we say anything else," he says, "I'm going to apologize and say I'm sorry. And you did exactly the right thing. I got a college degree. I'm selling golf equipment, maintenance equipment for Toro. And I can't thank you enough for doing that for me." And that probably felt better than finishing second at the NCAA.
Wow. I mean, that you did the right thing, and you did the right thing for the team actually, and for him. And because he was probably a kid of higher character than most people knew, it that seed that was planted eventually became something. And that's wonderful that he came. Did he seek you out, or was he at the tournament, or what?
We played together.
Okay. All
We
right.
were paired together the last round, and that was what was so shocking about the whole thing. I wasn't even paying attention who we were playing with.
Yeah, that's a good story. Very good story. So you do have a good college coaching career. Obviously, a bunch of coaches would love to have the career you had, and it was a little over 10 years. But you got into the golf industry. You worked for several different companies. One was Ping for quite a bit of time. You worked as a player manager agent for Gaylord Sports. And then you went to work for Nike, and you're still with Nike today. So I'm going to ask a question, and we can't go too deep into any of those three other than it's been a great career that you've had, and you're not through with it yet. But is there anything you took from coaching that helped you in your jobs at Ping and with Gaylord and now with Nike? Anything you took from coaching that you've used there?
I think the recruiting process and the relationship piece is invaluable, and you have to be there. You have to be seen when you're recruiting someone, and you want to sign them to play for you as a coach or to represent your company. And you have to be there constantly watching them. You're conspicuous by your absence, I believe. And I think that relationship piece is really important, and it allows you to dig down deep on who these people really are and build a relationship that lasts forever.
I love that. That's really good. Speaking of that, so I mean, building relationships, recruiting, that type of thing. When I was at Oklahoma State, I had a really, really good player named Pablo Martin. And Pablo was probably the best player in college golf, if not the best. He was certainly close. And we were going to Fort Worth for the Ben Hogan Award his last year at Oklahoma State. And you had set up and asked me to set up, can you bring Pablo by? We want to work on some wedges with Pablo. This is when you were still in the throes of, recruiting players for Nike. And so I did, and we went to the oven there at Leonard's. Where's the Leonard's driving range? Yeah.
Yes. Right.
And so they've got hitting bays there and the walls that separate each hitting bay. And so you're there working with Pablo, and you've got a technician there working and helping out. And I smell this cigar smoke. And I thought, okay. And so I kind of backed out of the hitting bay we were in and looked around the corner, and there stands Michael Jordan. And I thought to myself, man, this cricket is good. This is good. He's going to get this Pablo Martin. He's got the greatest basketball players ever lived hitting wedges next to him. Go ahead. Defend yourself. Tell me how that came about. I want to know.
Well, I wish I could take credit for the fact that Jordan was going to be there the same time Pablo. At Nike, we believe that we need to sign the greatest athletes in a category and build a business around them. So that was an easy transition because, as you know, Pablo Martin was one of the most naturally gifted, incredible golfers. He was the reincarnation of Seve with a little more spunk.
He was.
And amazing. So Jordan was there because he played a lot of golf in the off season. And believe it or not, when Michael shores up, so does the press. And Michael wasn't playing with Nike golf clubs. He was playing, I believe, with Ping. So that became a little bit of a bone of contention at the company. So Michael needed to come down and get fit for clubs, Nike golf clubs. And so he just happened to be there at the same time. Now, maybe I could have said Wednesday would be a good day, Mike, to bring Pablo by, and knowing that Michael was there.
Well, I will tell you this, just so I've never told you this, but so Pablo, I think we did that actually after the Hogan Awards ceremony. It was the next day or something. And so we were going through that, and you introduced Michael to him, or there was an introduction made, and Michael Jordan was just as nice as he could possibly be, and Pablo was just like stunned. And we get in the car and we're driving back to Stillwater, and it's 3 a.m. in Spain, where Pablo's from, and he's calling everybody he knows. And I mean, everybody he knows. And all I could hear was "Mi amigo Miguel, mi amigo Miguel." It's like Michael Jordan had become his best friend. It was really, really cute to watch Pablo. He was so thrilled to have met Michael Jordan. Okay, so you didn't set that up, but it worked out nicely. Serendipity, if you will. So another great player who was like Michael Jordan is Tiger Woods. It's the same thing. And Tiger obviously has been a Nike guy since day one. Tell me this. Do you have a relationship? Did you have some interaction with Tiger? You have anything you can offer there? I want to know anything you know about Tiger. The guy's amazing.
Well, I had only heard about Tiger. I'd never watched him in person. And I happened to play in the Porter Cup up in Niagara Falls when I was working for Ping. I still would go play in amateur tournaments. And Tiger had graduated. He was on his way to Stanford, and he was playing the amateur circuit. He had moved on. And I was with Chris Riley on the putting green after one of the rounds putting, and Riley and Tiger were big buddies in junior golf. And Riley's one of the few guys that could kind of get under Tiger's skin, because Riley was such a good putter. And when they would have putting contests, Riley would kill him. And it just made Tiger madder than a hornet. So we were standing on the putting green, and Tiger walks over, and Riley introduces me to him. And Tiger looks at me, he says, "I want one of those answer to putters like Mark O'Meara has, without the line in the cavity." And I said to him, "Well, those are custom, and it's against the NCAA rules and the USGA rules for me to give you something that we don't sell, and we don't sell that putter." And he looked at me with that look that you've seen Tiger a million times. And he said something to me I can't repeat. He says, "All right, I'll just go to Scotty Cameron and get one." That was really dumb on my part.
You didn't have to admit that story. But I asked you for a story, didn't I? Yes, I did.
Yeah, and he won a lot of events with that Cameron putter, and not with a Nike putter, or excuse me, with a Ping putter.
That is kind of a watershed moment in the history of golf right there. That's amazing. You were right there in the middle of it, huh?
Well, I don't know about that, but Tiger was going to use whatever it took for him to achieve at the highest level. Amazing guy.
Did you beat Tiger that week at the Porter Cup?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not, but I did make the cut, I believe, and he finished, I think, second to John Harris.
Oh, yeah.
If memory serves me correctly.
Really good player, John Harris.
Yeah.
All right. We're talking about great players. Give me 2 or 3 characteristics you think. You've been evaluating great players for, literally since you started coaching, so 40 years. So for 40 years, you've been watching some of the best, if not the best players in the world. What makes a great player?
Well, let's exempt the physical prowess and the talent and the physical ability they have, because all great players have the ability to hit the golf ball and make putts unlike others. But I do think that there's certain things that they have to have. They probably hate to lose more than they like to win. And there's a burning desire inside of them from a competitive nature. That is really important. I think great players, there's a lot of talented people, but those that are consistently perform at high levels is what surrounds greatness, where they show up at the biggest moments a lot. I think that makes, and that translates in at all levels of golf. And I think that you have to be able to perform consistently at a really high level. Not everyone makes it, but more than not. I think incredible discipline to look at yourself in the mirror and say, that I'm not really good at this, and I'm going to do everything it takes to fix that. And I think Victor Hovland is a really great example of this recently that kids can relate to. Here's a guy that had a terrible grip. First time I watched him over in Scotland at the European Boys Team Championship, guy had a terrible grip, but he hit it, and the noise he made was different than everybody else's. I'm watching Chris Ventura, and all of a sudden I'm watching Victor Hovland. And then the next time I see him at the U.S. Junior in the summer, his grip had changed, and it used to be really weak, then it went really strong, and now it was really strong, and he still performed. But the next time I saw him when he got to Oklahoma State, his grip was fixed. And here's a guy that gets on national television and tells you a couple of years ago that he's not a very good chipper and putter and pitcher. Well, he's fixed that too. So he's willing to put in the time and the effort, the discipline to fix it, even though he's really talented.
Those are good, really good summation there. I appreciate that. And I'm sure you're going to keep on watching good players for a long, long time. Are you playing, by the way, much?
Yeah, I play a little bit. I had the privilege of playing with Paul Stankowski last week in a pro scratch in Scottsdale at Greyhawk on Raptor. And it was such an enjoyable 3 days to spend time with someone that you mentored along the way. And just really, we laughed about things. Great story about Stanko. He is in the last group. He's playing with Fred Couples at Atlanta. And he is tied for the lead after 54 holes, and he doesn't play very well on the first 9 holes. He is walking from 9 green to 10 tee, and he hears my voice in his right ear. Stanko, quit worrying about your golf swing and start hitting golf shots. And he started laughing. He shoots, I want to say 32 on the back 9. He ties Brandel Chambly. They go into a playoff, and Stanko ends up beating Brandel in a playoff to win his first PGA Tour event. And he calls me after it was all over with, and he told me that story, and I just started laughing because you don't think they're listening, Mike, but they really are.
That's good coaching right there. That's really good. And by the way, Paul Stankowski, in my opinion, if there's a million tour players over the last 70 years, he's top 5 human beings. He's unreal.
Yeah, for sure.
He's in the top 5. He's great. Good friend of mine as well, but obviously you got to coach him and mentor him. That's a special story. So give me one more thing today before we shut it down. And that is, I want your best piece of advice. It could be 1, 2, or 3. And if it's just one piece of advice, that's fine. For any 14-year-old that comes to you and says, I want to play college golf and then I want to prepare to be a professional golfer. Now, give me the piece of advice you think if you left everything else out, this piece of advice would have a chance to get in there. This is big, Cricket. I want to hear it.
I think it all boils down to there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. But I think the ones that are successful have a plan on how to achieve and put those pieces together, and that they make tweaks along the way, but you have to have a plan. It is probably the most important part, whether it's finding someone you trust to teach you the game. Obviously the fitness piece, the wherewithal to go out and play competitively. You don't have to play AJGA event after AJGA event. You just need to go compete and learn how to play and win. And that's all part of that puzzle. And then start to put the pieces together on where you want to play and who you want to play for. And start that process down the road. And then the other piece is that I always look for athletes, and I think playing other sports is valuable because it teaches you the team concept, but it also teaches you to be really competitive when it's not resting solely on your shoulders. And there's so many great experiences and memories that come from that type of stuff.
Amen. I'm so tired when I hear coaches, swing instructors, just whomever, people that are advising kids and their parents, where they say you have to stop playing all the other sports and you have to focus on golf alone. You're tired of golf. I mean, you need a break from golf. There's other things in life. The greatest players in the world have a wife, and they love to hunt, or they love to go to football games, or they love to do other things. So why wouldn't it be okay to do other things as a kid? Thank you for that advice.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Okay. So one other thing before we leave is you are playing golf at Colonial quite a bit nowadays in Fort Worth. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what a wonderful venue. What a great track. What an unbelievable golf course, by the way. But you also have a new position where you're helping with the PGA Tour event there. Tell me about that, and then we'll let you go.
Well, as you know, we have hosted a college event there for several years, beginning back in 2014. And I have kind of been the person behind the scenes that has helped the club stage the event. And when Nike decided to exit running tournaments and sponsoring college golf tournaments, Colonial decided to go ahead and continue this because it's a great opportunity to expose future tour players, and the teams that come to our event are loaded with talented kids, as your teams have been. So we decided to put on this event that will fall underneath the big tournament committee and stage this college event and partner with the Ben Hogan Award moving forward, which is also held at Colonial. So I'm the member of the tournament committee that's kind of helping run that event. And also, I think at some point, because of my 40 plus years in this business, at the things that I've done, I will help them recruit players to come play in Colonial, because there's so many kids that are recent graduates all the way to guys that are in their mid 40s that at some place our paths have crossed and we're friends. So I'm going to help them bring better fields to Colonial. And as you said, that golf course will expose you and teach you so much about how good your game is. And it'll leave you with your tail between your legs and teach you some valuable lessons.
Yeah, I love Colonial. Obviously, I've always been a big Perry Maxwell fan, growing up on a lot of his golf courses, played and competed on a lot of his golf courses. But Colonial truly is standing the test of time. Still a great golf course. You get a little breeze with just a little bit of rough and some firmness and speed on those greens, and it's off the charts. It's just an amazing place. So I'm glad you're involved with that. Very good.
Well, the future is bright for Colonial because Gil Hanse is going to come in and take it back to where Perry Maxwell originally had it. And the new systems that they have for keeping greens alive, bent grass especially, hydronics is going to be put in there. So when you get firm, hard greens with some rough, you can expect that the cut will be over par. That's great. That's great. Well, Cricket, I want to just take a second here just to say thanks for taking an hour. We spent an hour here together this morning, just reminiscing, talking about your career and talking about things that I think are really important to college golf. And I think you've done a great job today inspiring people. So thank you so much. Well, it's my pleasure, Mike. I consider you a friend, and I look forward to seeing you soon.